If you're eating less, tracking calories, and still are not losing weight, then this video is for you. I thought that calorie deficits didn't work, or I just didn't understand them, but the truth is that I understood them almost too literally. After losing 13 kilos, I realized that fat loss isn't just about eating less. It's about figuring out how your body responds. In this video, I'm going to explain the truth about calorie deficits, metabolism, and why counting calories alone has kept me stuck for years. First, I want to talk a little bit about what a calorie deficit actually is. Because most people think that a calorie deficit just means eating less. But eating less and just having smaller portions or less meals isn't really the right way to look at it. It's a bit oversimplified. And usually it just leads to either undereating because you try to eat as little as possible, or actually overeating because you don't really understand what calories are, how they actually impact your body. I do also think that just eating less and restricting yourself in that way just creates a scarcity mindset around food. And it just really does not make it an enjoyable process, because usually what I've noticed is when you just try to eat less, first of all, you're not sure if you actually are eating less, so then you get frustrated when you don't see results. But also, you might not only cut down your portion sizes, but you also cut out maybe whole food groups or different kinds of foods that you deem unhealthy, which actually is not even relevant for losing weight. You could go to McDonald's every single day and still lose weight. Of course, you might not feel amazing doing it, and it would not really necessarily be healthy, but you do not have to cut out unhealthy food or things that you think are unhealthy, even if you like them, just because you think that you can't lose weight if you do eat them. Now, this whole idea of eating less to be in a calorie deficit often backfires because, for me at least, it used to trigger overeating and just inconsistency in general. Because usually, if you restrict so much that you get physically hungry, there is nothing else that could happen to your body than it responding with the opposite. Your hunger levels will increase. You will be hungrier the more you try to restrict yourself, and it's normal that that would lead into a binge or overeating. There's nothing wrong with you, but continuing this cycle of trying to eat as little as possible is exactly the cause of why you binge or overeat. Because your body, your hunger, or your metabolism, they're not broken. They're just trying to protect you from all of the undereating that you've been doing. So habits like skipping breakfast to save calories, or not eating when you're hungry because you have to save up for a meal, that's exactly what's going to lead into nighttime overeating and binging later in the day, and just in general feeling out of control. And I think one thing that a lot of people get wrong, or a huge misconception out there, is that your metabolism can be broken. That's only partially true. It can't really be broken, but it can adapt after a while. So what I mean by that is that the longer that you are in a calorie deficit, or the longer you restrict the amount of food that you consume, the more your body is going to adapt. For example, if your body burned 2,000 calories before you tried to lose weight, and then you go into a calorie deficit where you eat about 1,700 calories, your body slowly adapts, and the 1,700 calories become the new maintenance, so the new amount of calories that your body burns in a day. That's nothing bad. It doesn't mean that your metabolism is broken or anything like that, but it does make it harder to continue losing weight or just stop progress from stalling, because usually when people don't know about this, they get frustrated and maybe go right back to where they started. But basically, this happens because your body adapts. You maybe move a little bit less because your body thinks that you don't need as much energy since you've not been consuming as much. It shuts off things that aren't as important, for example, fidgeting or standing up one more time per hour or something like this. It just kind of tries to not do those so that you burn less. But you can reverse it even if you've been in a calorie deficit for a long time. You can reverse diet, which just means that you're gonna add calories every single week slowly and build back up to those, for example, 2,000 calories a day. And then once you get there, you stay there for a few weeks. You make sure that your weight is stabilized at that level, and then you can go back into a calorie deficit, which is much easier than trying to start the second deficit at 1,700 calories and then going even lower at like 1,500, 1,200, which is really not sustainable to have a calorie deficit that low. Now, having talked about calories a little bit, I actually want to mention why only following a calorie deficit did not work for me. I've tried it many times before. It didn't really stick for a long time just because I was only focusing on how many calories I was consuming. And if I was over, that was bad. And if I was under, I would actually eat even if I wasn't hungry. So that's something that I changed this time around when I've lost 13 kilos. Because the important thing when you are counting calories is not just the counting, but the understanding of what you're actually doing. And also not only having it as your only thing, your only tool. For me, I did intuitive eating for about 1.5 to 2 years before even going into this calorie deficit, which taught me so much, especially with listening to my hunger and satiety cues and just not seeing food as good and bad anymore. I do have a video where I explain exactly what I changed and what I brought with me from the intuitive eating journey that I've had, which I'm just going to link up here. Basically, it did help me a lot, and I think that it's also one of the reasons why I'm going to be able to maintain this weight going forward. While I was eating intuitively, I started with some habits that I didn't have before that weren't as important to me when I tracked my calories the first time around. For example, I noticed that protein in the morning really helps me stay satiated for the rest of the day and makes me stop having cravings almost altogether. So that's a staple that I'm trying to hold on to a lot, especially when my routine changes. It's something that I know is very easy to maintain and it's not that much more effort. So I think finding little things like that integrate into your life and, help you and support you during your deficit. If I'm being honest, look into intuitive eating and just the whole principles of how to learn these things, because it's really, really helpful to know how to listen to your body and not only look at what the app tells you, because tracking without structure and without outside tools leads to obsession, and that's exactly what happened for me. I was obsessed with it for a while, but then I fell off track and then I just didn't want to do it anymore. So tracking is not a rule, it's just a tool that you use to get to your goal. I also kind of want to talk about what a real calorie deficit looks like, because I think it's kind of either glamorized in a way that makes it look way too good or looked at in a way that is very restrictive. But I think there's a middle ground somewhere that you can find where it's actually kind of boring, not very obsessive, and can just fit into your life very easily during this time that you want to lose fat. For me, for example, I just try to figure out my maintenance first, which just means that's the amount of calories that you burn in a day with the amount of movement that you do in a week and just your day-to-day life. And then as soon as you have that, you figure out your deficit, which is usually around 300 to 500 calories per day that you eat less. So if your maintenance is at 2,000 calories, that would mean that your deficit is at 1,700 calories or 1,500 calories. I would always try to do the option that isn't the bigger deficit yet, because if I'm being completely honest, what makes a calorie deficit sustainable, especially because of the reason that I mentioned before with your metabolism adapting, is that you can actually stick to it. So if, for example, you choose the 300 calorie deficit, so 1,700 calories per day, you will still have a little bit of room and flexibility to move down to 1,500 calories when your metabolism does adapt. So before having to go back to maintenance, you can still go a little bit further. But then also, why would you do so much in the beginning when the beginning is exactly where you can still do the minimum amount required to lose weight? And I would always do that. You have to do the minimum amount to still lose weight instead of doing the maximum, because the maximum is going to burn you out. You're not going to be able to maintain that for a very long time. But if you do the minimum and then add a little bit to it when you get to a point where you're not going to lose weight anymore, then you're still going to lose weight, but in a much more sustainable and enjoyable way. And I think the mindset shift that changed everything for me in terms of being in a calorie deficit is that it's not supposed to be something horrible that's punishing you or that you hate, but instead it's supposed to be something that supports you in your day-to-day life. And like I said, it's a tool, it's not your whole structure. You're supposed to be able to go out to eat to restaurants and with friends and not track everything all the time. I definitely do not track all the time because it's just not sustainable and you're just gonna drive yourself crazy. As long as you still see progress and you still continue to lose weight, I would not be too strict with yourself with how you track your calories. I do weigh my food because I think that that's a very easy way to kind of figure out how much it actually is, but I do not track every single meal or every single thing because it's just unsustainable for me, and it still works. As long as it works, you do not have to change anything. As soon as you notice that your scale is stalling for like 2 weeks and nothing is moving, then I would tighten up your tracking a little bit, figure out, is it actually because I'm not tracking properly and I'm overeating, or is it because my metabolism has adapted a little bit so I have to change something else? But basically I just stopped trying to eat as little as possible and started wanting to become someone that is just staying consistent with the way that they eat. Because fat loss is not about forcing your body to suffer and to go through something horrible. It's about supporting yourself. It's supposed to be something that is self-care, that is for you. Because I hate seeing those videos where people just eat so little to lose weight, to be perfect. But perfection does not exist, first of all. And second, you can do it in a way that is not miserable. And why choose the miserable way if you can do it in a way that supports your life and supports the person that you actually want to become? So if this made calorie deficits finally make sense, then you need to watch the video that's going to pop up on the screen right now about consistency and why you can never stay consistent, how I finally broke the cycle. So I really hope that this helped and that I see you in my next video. Bye!